Hello again, friend. I'm Eric Miller. In our society today, it's not really that acceptable for a man to express any emotions other than anger, and I guess sometimes we can be happy and express that as well. So for women, those emotions of that are expressed of sadness and of just needing help are much more accepted than men. Has there been a situation recently where you're grieving the loss of a friend, a loved one, that it just you haven't been allowed to be able to grieve that person? Or what about even a job? Or as we get older, our bodies don't work as well. So I've been an athlete most of my life. I'm noticing the changes in my body that I can't do the workouts I used to do, or ride my bike is intensely as I used to be able to do. So that grieving process has been another thing for me as well. Today's video is about an article I just posted on Substack, and it has to do with my loss I had last year and the journey I've had over the last 8 months in that process, where I noticed that certain family members weren't there that I thought would be because they would understand the situation. Other family members who I knew would be there for me were there for me, and friends as well. So I think sometimes when we lose an individual, it's not really, there's a lot of mystery as to how you can support that person. Bringing up the loss of a loved one makes someone else feel uncomfortable because they don't know what to say. Or maybe they're even thinking, thank God it was you and it wasn't me that you lost that person. So today's video is dedicated to this article I wrote about my daughter, Erica. And this article I posted on Substack. In the description of this video, I'll have a link to this Substack article. Also, if you know of someone who might be going through a loss right now, but not quite sure how to be supported, how they view God in this situation, please share this video with them. Maybe they'll get the help they need in this. And would you subscribe to the channel? I really appreciate the support. All right, let's jump in. The article name is Where Was God on October 26th? Where I found God in the wreckage and why men have to feel grief all the way through, not just the anger. On October 26th, 2025, my daughter Erica died. I'm not going to walk you through the details of that day. They belong to me, to my wife, to my sister, and the few friends who carried us through it. There are hours to hold, and you don't need them to sit with what I'm about to say. What I'll tell you is that the question I've been carrying since that day, the one that is beside me on the trail when I'm riding my bike, is the same question every man I've ever sat with has asked in his own version on his worst possible day. Where was God? I've spent years sitting with men in the hardest seasons, coaching, spiritual directing them through divorces, relapses, and bankruptcies, and the slow grief of life that didn't go the way they had planned. I've heard this question more times than I can count, and I've always answered it carefully, gently, without rushing toward easy comforts. Here's the strange part. 8 months in, I think I do know the answer. I even half knew it on the day that she died, though I couldn't have said it out loud then. But before I can tell you where I found God, I have to clear away where I haven't, because the easy answers people reach for aren't just hollow. They're the very thing that keeps a grieving man from ever finding the real one. What I won't say to a grieving man, here's what I won't say. I won't say God needed another angel, because he didn't. Whatever God is, that God didn't need her more than we did. I won't say everything happens for a reason, because not everything does. Some things just happen, and the search for the reason is a kind of cruelty we inflict on each other when we don't know what else to say. I won't say time heals all wounds, because it doesn't. Time only changes the shape of the wound, and the wound itself is its own forever thing. I won't say God won't give you more than you can handle, because that isn't true either. It isn't in the Bible where people think it is, and I've watched too many men collapse under exactly that lie. I won't say that this was God's will either, because I don't believe it was. God didn't reach down and choose this or need it or write it in a plan I'm meant to understand someday. Whatever else I've come to believe, I won't lay my daughter's death at God's feet. And I won't say, be strong for your family, because that's the lie that turns a man's grief into a clenched jaw and a short fuse, and it costs him the very people he's trying to hold together. Men in grief, why anger becomes the only emotion. I've learned something about men and grief in the years I've done this work, and I've relearned every bit of it from the inside these last 8 months. We're handed exactly one acceptable emotion. A man is allowed to be angry because anger reads as strength and control and doing something. So when the grief comes, most of us route the whole flood through the only channel we've been given to call, and it's rage. We snap at the people we love. We pick fights we don't care about. We set our jaws and tell everyone we're fine. But anger is only one room in a very large house, and grief means walking through all the rooms. There's the denial that keeps reaching for the phone to text someone who can't answer. There's the bargaining that replays the timeline looking for the exit you think you missed. There's the depression that isn't a disorder but a weight, the body's honest response to the hole in the world. And there's the thing people call acceptance, though I don't love the word. It sounds like agreement. I'll never agree to this. What I call it's closer to caring, learning to walk again while holding what you can't put down. The men who do this the worst are the ones who try to skip the house entirely and live it in the one room marked with anger. I've lived it and I've watched it over the years. The anger feels like motion, like strength, but it's a man's standing still and calling it running, and it hardens into something that outlasts the grief and poisons everything it touches. The marriage, the kids, the work, the faith. Grief doesn't get smaller when you refuse to feel it. It just goes underground and comes back wearing a different face. So here's what I actually offer men who sit across from me now, and it isn't advice and it isn't a 5-step plan. I offer them permission to feel the thing all the way down to weep in front of another man without apologizing for it, to be sad and frightened and lost instead of only anger, to admit that the faith that they were once sure of has gone quiet. I offer them a room where they don't have to be strong, because the performance of strength is the very thing that has been killing them. And then I stay. I don't fix it because it can't be fixed. And the men who try to sell them a fix are part of why they're so alone. I just sit with them and tell them the truth, that this won't be over soon, that there's no shortcut through the house, and that feeling it fully isn't weakness, but the bravest thing a man can do. That was the work before October 26, and it's the work now, except now I'm a man who needs it as badly as any of them do. My sister knows this house better than anyone should have to. She has buried 3 of her own children, my nieces and nephew. When she came to sit with me, she didn't bring a single easy comfort, because she's been to the bottom of every one of them and found it to be empty. She didn't tell me it would be okay. She just sat in the wreckage with me because she lived there, and there is a particular mercy in being held by someone who isn't flinching, someone who already knows the worst and has stayed alive anyway. My wife held me other ways, the daily way, the one that keeps a man fed and breathing when he's forgotten how to do either. Between the two of them, I finally had to test something I'd been telling other men for years. That grief isn't a problem to be solved, but a weight to be shared, and that we were never meant to carry alone. Finding God in the ordinary. So where was God on October 26th? I used to think that question had no answer, or that the only honest answer was a shrug. I don't think that anymore. God was where God always is, not up in the sky deciding who lives and who dies, not arranging the worst day of my life for some hidden purpose I'm supposed to thank him for later. God didn't take her. But God was in the room that day, and God is in the room now, because I've come to believe that God mostly shows up as your life, in the ordinary and in other people. God was my sister who buried 3 children of her own and still came to sit in the wreckage with me. God was my wife doing the daily unglamorous work of keeping me alive when I'd forgotten how to. God was the friend who sat with me and said nothing for an hour, and the 100 small mercies I kept calling coincidence until I ran out of room to call them that. The presence I felt that day wasn't separate from those people. It was wearing their faces. That's how God comes, not as a rescue from the ordinary, but as the ordinary. God comes as the ordinary, holding you when you can't hold yourself. I used to call that as a suspicion. 8 months in, it feels more like something I know, that God was the one weeping with us, and that weeping wasn't weakness on God's part, but the most ancient response any God worth the name has ever had to the death of a child. I do believe Erica is in a better place, not a slogan someone hands you to end an uncomfortable conversation, and not because it fills the chair where she should be, because nothing ever will. The place she should have been is here, with us, growing older. I believe it because the same God who keeps showing up in my life, in the ordinary and in the people who love me, isn't the kind of God who would let her go anywhere unheld. She's being held the way I've been held. I can prove it. I can't prove it. I've stopped even needing to. If you've been carrying your own version of October 26th, your own date, your own name, your own hold, the shape of someone who should still be there, I want you to know 2 things. The first is that you don't have to accept the easy comforts, and you don't have to perform a peace you don't have, but you also don't have to stay in the dark to prove your grief is real. You can refuse the slogans and still go looking for God, and you'll most likely find him exactly where I did. Not in some grand sign, but in the person sitting beside you, in the meal someone pays for anonymously at a restaurant, in the ordinary day that somehow keeps arriving. The second is that I want to tell you is that you aren't alone in it, because I'm walking through it too. Erica isn't coming back, and I'm still here, and so are you. And somehow we're being carried through this together, even when we don't know each other's names. That has to be enough for today, because some days that's all there is, and lately, more often than not, it turns out to be enough. So I hope sharing this with you this vulnerability I want to share with you is useful, because I do truly believe that in our society, people don't know how to support another person going through grief. We have a lot of grief for people today in our country, the United States, that's so much anger and so much hatred. The division of our people is made a lot of situations where people cannot be open with another person because of the fear of being vulnerable, what might happen in that situation. But find someone that can support you. It may not be a family member, quite frankly. It may not even be a friend. My work in spiritual direction is some of the most life-changing work that I've experienced personally, having a spiritual director and also accompanying others on their spiritual journey. So I'm not here to try to plug you on what I do. I'm just saying that in a spiritual sense, this is a spiritual matter, that having someone by your side is really critical, that you have that today. I've been there by myself, and it's a really scary place to be. And maybe you know what I'm talking about. So, my friend, these are the words I want to say to you today that I hope are useful. And I really love what I do because I get to see and make a big difference in the others' lives. So, until I talk to you again, take care.